Back in 1996, Wes Craven wasn't just trying to scare us with Scream, he was trying to open our eyes as horror fans. Scream took all the things slasher movies had been doing for literal decades, from the rigid rules and predictable patterns to the tired cliches, and it pointed a big spotlight directly at them. And then it asked us the simple but intriguing question: if you knew how horror worked, could you survive it? Now, fast forward 30 years, and Scream 7 seems to be answering that question by patting us on the head and gently reassuring us as modern horror fans that there's nothing to worry about. Of course you're going to get through this because you've been through it many times already. 7 times to be exact, and that is the problem. This franchise hasn't just lost its razor-sharp edge, it has become exactly what Wes Craven designed it to slice to pieces in the first place. Now, I'm not suggesting Scream 7 is some kind of singular failure. It's more like the culmination of a pattern this franchise has been doubling down on for years. When Craven released the original Scream 3 decades ago, he was acknowledging something most horror directors never do, that being, his audience wasn't stupid. The script presumed our awareness of the rules to these movies, whether we are consciously aware of them or not. Don't drink or do drugs, don't have sexual relations, and don't ever say, "I'll be right back." But Scream didn't lean on these rules like some kind of safety net, it weaponized them to the extent that knowing all the rules didn't make you feel safer, it somehow made you feel nervous, which is fantastic. And because of that, Scream always felt like it was one step ahead of you. You'd be thinking, okay, I know where this is going, and it wouldn't go there. Or even better, it would go there, but not in the way you were positive it was going to 5 seconds ago. And that now iconic opening scene exemplifies this point perfectly. It didn't just set the tone of the movie, it destroyed our trust in the movie going forward. Drew Barrymore's death meant we were going to spend the rest of the movie standing on shaky ground. And at the time, nobody was associating that wonderfully perilous sensation with slasher movies. And with that specific opening, Wes Craven was telling us in no uncertain terms, this movie is literally not going to play by the rules, and that is exactly what made it work. It was self-aware, and it was self-critical, and it was pointing its big bony finger at slasher movies and saying, this is what you've become. But more importantly, in doing that, it was also pointing its big bony finger at me and at you. It was saying, as fans of this stuff, this is what you've become. And if you think about it, that's kind of a big accomplishment for a movie supposedly about a clumsy, indignant maniac with a knife and a cheap plastic mask, isn't it? Now, jump ahead to 2026, and something weird is happening because the rules aren't being challenged anymore. They're actually being followed, and followed carefully and repeatedly, and dare I say, respectfully? If you squint really hard at what modern Scream is actually doing, it's not dissecting horror anymore. It feels more like it's trying to preserve it. You can see it in the constant callbacks and the multiple mirrored scenes and the dialogue that is knowingly being clever, or attempting to be clever. But instead of delivering the usual dread and tension we all gladly fork our hard-earned money over for, these weird shifts in focus have forced an awkward kind of recognition on us. These new Scream movies leave me with an overpowering aftertaste of familiarity. It's like the film's constantly tapping us on the shoulder going, hey, remember how cool it was when that person did that thing a long time ago? And we're like, of course we remember. And that's exactly the problem. Because despite you treating us as otherwise, we are still that intelligent, discerning audience Wes Craven was reaching out to 30 years ago. Except since then, as proud fans of the original masterpiece, we have gained 30 years worth of experience with these films. Familiarity implies a sense of relaxation or even intimacy between people, and this intelligent, discerning audience knows full well in movie terms, relaxation is about as far away from terror as you can get. Fundamentally speaking, horror does not work when things feel relaxed. And Scream 7, for all of its polish and forced self-awareness, feels very safe. The cinematography in Scream 7 is immaculate. The pacing is airtight, and that makes the characters feel kind of protected. Not protected by the character's intelligence or by the story logic, they feel protected by the immense weight of the Scream franchise itself. It's as if they can't risk doing anything too unpredictable anymore because this is Scream. Scream's a brand, and everybody knows what happens if you go off. You're not thinking of going. Get David Ellison on the fucking phone. And this is exactly where the irony starts choking me, because the original movie famously asked us what happens when horror becomes a formula. 30 years later, Scream 7 is that formula. Wes Craven's commentary on slasher films has become the content. The very rebellion at the heart of Scream's original message is now its trademarked branding. Horror sequels can absolutely be amazing. Just look at Evil Dead 2 or Aliens, to name a couple. But they succeeded by constantly raising the stakes and by expanding their story worlds and by deepening our understandings of the characters and their conflicts. But to me, by contrast, these Scream sequels have done the exact opposite. They have simply repeated a formula, and in my humble opinion, Scream 7 has done it to such an extreme it actually contains no original material. And for me, this is where Wes Craven has to come back into the picture, because he wasn't just making horror for us, he was reshaping horror over and over again, every time we needed him to. He understood a crucial, fundamental movie truth. Fear changes. Audiences change. Our collective social anxieties change. Everything changes. Wes Craven transformed horror by treating it as something that could be intellectually rigorous and socially conscious, instead of some loud, startling roller coaster ride through a dark house filled with CGI cobwebs. He started back in the 70s with brutal movies like Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes. Even back then, he was using horror to critique things like American society and violence and class division. Then, in the 80s, with A Nightmare on Elm Street, he introduced us to a surreal, dream-based rubber reality. It was a form of horror that removed the safety of real-world boundaries, and in doing so, it proved slashers could be psychologically inventive instead of just kick, punch, stab, fuck. And then he reinvented horror again in the 90s with Wes Craven's New Nightmare and, of course, Scream. And between these two movies, he gave us what we now know as self-aware meta-horror. Craven's core belief that fear changes over time and that horror has to evolve alongside his audience's anxieties is what made Scream work. He knew if you want your horror movies to succeed in any kind of meaningful, lasting way, they have to change too. If you just keep repeating the same idea, expecting it to land with the same impact, you won't challenge people, you won't unsettle them in the theater, and you definitely won't catch them off guard and leave them standing on shaky ground where anything can happen. And that is why none of this feels right anymore. Somewhere along the lines, Scream stopped asking us what's scaring you now, and it started reminding us these movies came from something better. But doing that just highlights the reality this once edgy and exciting movie now feels preserved. It's like they're keeping the movie in a jar of formaldehyde so they don't risk breaking their own legacy by altering it. I won't go as far as to make the Ghostface joke everybody online seems to be making, but it's hard to argue. Even the legacy characters are starting to look preserved. And horror is not meant to be preserved. It is meant to grow and to mutate and to spill out over the sides and make a big mess on the carpet as it is taking risks, even when the risks fit. Especially when the risks fail, because that is where all the magic is, and that is where Wes Craven wanted us to be. So, I am comfortable saying it. Ghostface isn't scary anymore. But do you know what is scary? I just sounded like a YouTuber about to cut to my sponsorship. But do you know what is scary? Slices of cheese. These are my favorite slices of cheese, and if you'd like to try these slices of cheese, which happen to be my favorite, I have arranged a special discount for you of 10%. The code is in the description if you would like to try these slices of cheese. But you know what is scary? When these big franchises stop questioning themselves, when they get totally comfy, resting on their laurels and carting out legacy characters in hopes of reconnecting you with a feeling you had 30 years ago. When franchises start doing that, they are not telling you stories anymore, they are telling you they've got nothing left to say. In 1996, Scream held up a mirror to horror, and to us, and it forced us to examine where our movies had ended up and where we had ended up as their fans. And now, in 2026, Scream is looking into that same mirror, but for some reason, it loves what it's seeing. I don't ever want to look into a mirror and see no room for improvement. To me, that's not comforting, that's stagnation, that's creative death. If this franchise continues on its current trajectory, I am pretty sure I know what I am going to think of Scream 8. But I'm only 99% sure, so I'm probably going to have to watch it to find out. That's the horror fan in me. But if they don't make Scream 8 at all, I think I would be very happy. Not because I don't love the idea of trying to capture lightning in a jar for the second time, but because maybe it's time we stopped trying to resurrect the corpse of this long-dead franchise and started focusing instead on honoring the man who gave it life in the first place. Because Wes Craven was never trying to safely preserve our love of horror, he was encouraging us to try and grow and change along with it. And for me personally, I think I've figured out over the course of recording this little rant, the most disappointing and heartbreaking possibility might be the realization that we all stopped evolving with him, and now he's gone. So I can only hope one day the powers that be might actually let the man rest in peace. But until then, we shall wait for Scream 8. Slices of cheese. But do you know what is scary? Slices of cheese. If you want 10% off of these slices of cheese. But do you know what is scary? Slices of cheese. And I have arranged... But do you know what is scary? But do you know what is scary? Slices of cheese. These particular slices of cheese are my favorite slices of cheese, and if you want these slices of cheese, I have arranged a discount for you for 10%. But do you know what is scary? Slices of cheese. These are my favorite slices of cheese, and if you want to try these slices of cheese, which happen to be my favorite,